It's my pleasure to take part in this FDP and thank you for the management of IIT Ropar for giving me the opportunity, particularly the people who set the foundations of the blockchain, particularly making my job easier, Professor K. Das, Professor Nitin, and Dr. Sumitra and Sujata Paul for an excellent coordination, and Professor Pandurangan for setting the basic foundation for this blockchain. So we are taking this FTP to the next level, and we are going to talk about what are all the various types of blockchain that is available in the market. And this session and the next session, I'm going to talk about the consensus of the blockchain, types of blockchain and consensus of blockchain. I have extracted the concept from my book. Actually, I have very recently in October 2020 published a book on blockchain and published by Universities Press. And maybe I will give you the detail by end of this presentation. So whatever we are going to talk in these two sessions, that will be like an extract from this book published by the Universities Press. I will give you more detail about the book by the end of this session. I think that's why you saw some elephant in the beginning, right? You will be wondering what is it? Elephant is all about. So actually, that is a wrapper of my book. I will introduce you shortly by end of this session. And thank you, Sujata, for reminding me that. So coming back to this topic, right? The blockchain, as introduced by Professor Pandurangan, it consists of multiple blocks, right? And if you look into this, the content of the blocks, as Professor Pandurangan was trying to explain, right? First thing is it has a lot of hashes, right? Shortly, I will tell you what is hash. So every block has the hash of the previous hash. So thereby, it is closely connected with each and every block. For example, if you look into the block 1 hash, it has a connection to the Genesis block. In fact, first block is always called as a Genesis block, right? So if you look into the block 2, it has a hash of the previous block hash. Like this, if you keep on going it, every block is tightly linked and connected with each other through this hashing mechanism. In fact, this hashing mechanism is used for any type of blockchain, wherever you go, right? Of course, there are different types of blockchain. We'll be talking about it. This is the basic fundamental building blocks of any blockchain, right? In addition to that one, in order to maintain the state, we also have the timestamp. In fact, this is something unique as far as the block is concerned. So the timestamp indicate that who created the block earlier. Say, for example, let's say that one of you was creating a block at let's say 1 o'clock today. I'm creating similar kind of block by 1:30. Most probably your block will get accepted because your timestamp is something quicker than 1:30 p.m. So that is a timestamp is also maintained. And another one is some nonce. Nonce means a random number. So random number is also added in order to increase, say, the mining capability. It's just a random number added to create the hash. And another one is the Merkle root. Merkle root is nothing but hash of all the previous transaction. So one is the previous hash, and also we have the Merkle root that tightly connect with the block so that the block become immutable with each other. I cannot just like that go to and change the block 2 without changing the block 3 or block 1. And vice versa, right? So in a blockchain, there will be hundreds and thousands of blocks will be there. So just changing a block without changing its hash or the Merkle root, it's very difficult. In other way, identifying the Merkle root itself is very difficult, right? The job given to the the miners. That is why making the job of the miner is very, very difficult. And of course, checking that will be easy because if you look into this block, right? Say we are all checkers. We can say that some number is there in the hash, right? So it will be easy for us to check, right? The number will be like this. This is an exact of the hash. This is how the hash will be looking like it. Here, the one of the uniqueness of the hash, even if I slightly change the input, the output will be completely changed. For example, right, the first row talking about the text or OK was given as an input. Right here, there is an algorithm called SHA-256 algorithm. Like this, we have a multiple hashing algorithm. This SHA-256 is the most frequently used algorithm in the blockchain. So if OK is given as an input, you see some digits are coming over here, right? And the world is a balloon. If I give it with the exclamatory, then there is some hash. I just removed that exclamatory mark in the third one. You see that hash is completely got changed, right? But I changed my text input very lightly, but the hash got changed completely. So based on my hash, it's very difficult to identify the next hash. If you look into the third one, right, I just changed the letter, capital letter T to small letter t. Then the hash got completely changed. So this is what the very important concept of the hash is concerned. This make identification by looking into the hash. It's very difficult to identify the input, right? But however, based on the input, the hash is getting resulted. For example, it is like we can say that our thumb impression, right? Based on the thumb impression, we can say who is that person. But based on the person, can we identify the thumb impression? That's very, very difficult, right? So we can say that hash algorithm is something like a thumb impression kind of thing that makes each block unique. So like every one of us has a thumb impression, every block has a hashing thing, and it is something unique. And most of the time, it will not get repeated. Even mathematically proven, it's very difficult to create a hash just by changing something over there, like a balloon or capital letter of the T, like that. So no matter the size of the input string, the output is always 64 characters, right? So even right, if you know programming, even the whole program can be given as an input. An object can be given as an input. A class can be given as an input. A string can be given as an input. Text can be given. A number can be given, right? Anything can be given as an input, but this hash algorithm uniquely creates 64 characters for you, right? So a completely different hash result is what this makes this unique. That is how the block we identify when we move from one block to the next block. So before talking to the types of the blockchain, I would like to talk about how the hash and the hash cache is being implemented. See, for example, let's say that I'm trying to propose a new block in my blockchain. Now, what happened actually for my new block? I create a block header. I need to create the previous block hash, as we already discussed that. And based on that, I combine it and create a hash, new hash for my new blockchain, right? And the unique aspects of it, there is a condition, right? Otherwise, anybody can create a hash, right? Using SHA-256. The condition is very simple. The hash, what you create, should be lesser than already set limit by the software, right? So a software will give you that what is the resultant hash, and whatever the hash you created, the 64 character should be lesser than that hash given for you. So for that to happen, we have something called nonce. Nonce is a random number created. So based on that, I create a hash ID. And if the hash is lesser than the target value, if it is not, and I will keep on changing my nonce. And thereby I will create it. The moment I reach that hash, yes, my puzzle got solved. This is a very simple algorithm, but yes, we have a more complex algorithm also as we move forward. So if my hash is lesser than the target hash, and that will be added to the blockchain, then there will be a tick mark, and I will send the block to all the blockchains, right? And then automatically it will get added. This is how the hash is using. This is a simple mining process that is being used in all the blockchain, irrespective of the type of the blockchain. So with this, let's move on. And there is also difficulty target is also given. In addition to the nonce, they will try to increase the difficulty as you move on. See, for example, right, let's say that adding the second block or third block will be easier, but adding the 100th block will be very, very tough, because the toughness number will keep on increasing. That is called as difficulty target, right? That is also part of the block. So this is a simple hashing mining algorithm. Yes, Dr. Naresh.
Sorry for interrupting you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, can you please repeat the mining process once again, sir?
Okay, sure.
The previous slide.
Sure, I'll do it. So the thing is, so we know what is a block. We know what is the content of the block. So the content of the block is given as an input for the hashing algorithm. Just in the previous video, right? The previous slide, we talked about hashing, right? The whole block is given as an input, and then in turn, we get a hash. So whenever I want to add a new block, right? And that new block also, I need to convert that into a hash. So that new block, there is a limit actually. What is the new block should be? It should have the previous hash block. I need to identify and add it, time box and time stamping, and everything need to be added in addition to the transaction which I want to add. So it has all the detail. Now I'm trying to create a hash by giving my new block as an input. Now here is the thing, toughness, that new block hash should be lesser than a target hash. Target hash is nothing but it will be given by you by the algorithm. So how will you make the new hash lesser than my target hash? There is something called random number within my block. So I keep on changing my nonce, or even I can even change transaction also. Please understand the timestamp also will get changed, right? Every second, the clock will keep on tickling. So I will keep on creating a new hash until my new hash value is lesser than the target value. The moment I reach that, then I'm being allowed to add my block into the already existing blockchain. Then I will transmit my block to all the blockchain owners, and everybody will add this block to the existing block with them, existing blockchain with them. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. Means miner's job is
This is a miner's job.
add the okay. This is only one part of the mining job, right?
Exactly correct.
Acha, okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Thank
Okay,
you, sir.
so the left out thing, what I have not talked here is the block also will have a transaction, right? That is what we discussed in the previous slide, right? The block also will have a transaction also attached to it at the last, right? So I need to keep on adding a lot of transaction. So whenever the transaction is added, so a set of transaction only allowed. There are other conditions like what will be the size of the block, etc. That I'm not talking about it here. The one part is we are talking only about the mining process, about the hashing, right? Okay, let's move on. So if you have any questions, right, maybe we'll keep it at the end, maybe, right, that will be easy for the flow for me, if you don't mind. So now the hash is added. Please understand this hashing algorithm make the blockchain as immutable, because just like that, I cannot go and change the block, because you know that that block has a hash of the previous block. That block is also have the hashes of the already existing lot of transaction in the name of the Merkle root, right? So adding a block is very, very difficult in between, but provided the software allows you to change it, that can also be done. But that is a very, very difficult thing. So that makes the blockchain something called as immutable. So meaning what? Any addition is very, very difficult. Addition also will be added as a new block only. You cannot just like that go and change the block. That is very, very difficult. So immutability is one of the fundamental principles of any blockchain, in addition to the decentralization. Now, what are the types of blockchain? Right, that is our topic of today. So as Professor Pandurangan was sending the foundation, right? So there is something called permissionless. Usually, because we are trying to convert a centralization into the decentralized one. The fundamental principle of blockchain is a decentralization, right? Because of the centralization only, all the banking things, the system got collapsed, and about a lot of money, right? About $700 billion were pumped in by the US government, right? In order to overcome that challenges in 2008. But still, we are not able to come out. I hope all of you know about it, right? That's a chain reactions happen. Now, what I'm trying to tell you, please understand that is we are moving away from the centralized to the centralized environment. So when you move to the decentralized environment, again, this concept was clearly called out by Professor Pandurangan. One end we keep the decentralization. If you look into the triangle, when you want to keep the privacy higher, the cost will be higher, right? So meaning in the blockchain, if you talk about only the privacy, I need to put a lot of algorithm on privacy, then the cost of the blockchain will go higher. Okay. But on another end, I put a lot of importance on security. Then the scalability is a question, right? But obviously speaking, the blockchain should have all these combinations, right? So that is what is very, very difficult. Then that is why Professor was telling that the blockchain concept keeps on evolving, right? So we have a decentralization. It also should talk about security. It also should talk about the privacy. The cost also should be lower, and the scalability also should be good. So that is why we have a different types of blockchain to cater to this need. The first very default thing is a fully decentralized system that we call it as a public permissionless blockchain, fully decentralized, right? Anybody can take part in it. The best example is Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is also one of the, I'm talking about the Bitcoin currency, right? It can be given as an example of a public blockchain, public permissionless blockchain. So anybody can add it. Anybody can become a miner, right? And anybody can add the transaction. Anybody can buy it also. The problem comes only when you are trying to convert the Bitcoin into US dollar, that is the fiat currency, right? That is where we all get caught. The concept of cryptocurrency and the cryptocurrency level is going very good, no doubt about it. But cryptocurrency alone is not enough, right? In order to use it in my day-to-day life, I need to convert my cryptocurrency into a fiat currency. Without that, I cannot use it, right? So that part is still going after 10 years or 12 years into the system. I'll say that first paper, right, of the blockchain came in the year 2009, right? So after 11 years almost, still we have this problem connecting or converting cryptocurrency into the fiat currency, right? It is not being addressed, but we are evolving a lot in the last 10 years on the blockchain technology. So please understand, blockchain technology is a fundamental technology behind the Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin, there are a lot of cryptocurrency has evolved over a period of time. But blockchain concept is something unique. That is what I think we are talking about it today. And blockchain can be applied in a multiple domains, technology, and like a banking, finance, insurance, healthcare, retail, right, real estate, education, like this, because of the blockchain as a technology, right? So in addition to the cryptocurrency. Okay, coming back to this topic. So fully decentralized is an authentic blockchain we call, because one of the earlier system got developed using fully decentralized system. So anyone public can participate it and anyone can add it. What is the problem? Because I'm allowing the system to accessible by the public, the scalability is a question. Because it become a very heavy, right? A lot of people will get transacted, right? And whom I need to allow. So there are a lot of things. Then the scalability is a big issue as far as the public permission blockchain is concerned. So there we are going to the next type of blockchain called as private permissionless. Private permissionless. Say, for example, I'm running a company. I want to maintain a blockchain within my company. I'm a single organization, right? I want to maintain blockchain within my company, and then I go for a private permissionless. What is permissionless? The thing is, there is no need for you to get permission from anybody, but however, only authorized nodes can have an access, because it is my own blockchain within my own company. I will not allow access to the another company, but within my company, anybody can add, right? But based on the authorization. So only authorized nodes can access the network to read and write. And since the accessibility is very limited and high scalability is possible than the public permissionless, right? That is a biggest advantage. Now you can ask a question, right? The concept, the fundamental concept of a blockchain is a decentralization, right? But we are going away from the decentralization. Yes, that is what it is, right? So always, no, whenever there is a theory, an anti-theory is always comes up with it. This is how it is, okay? When you go for a public permissionless, some people want a blockchain only to be done for their own company. So we are going for a private permissionless blockchain. Of course, shortly we'll talk about the example. So now there is the third type of blockchain is also there. That is public permission. So please understand, it is public. Anyone in public can join and read audit. But however, only particular people can authorize something, authorized to write something. That means anybody can read it. I'll put something. For example, let's say that you are going for a registration office to register your loan, right? That can be one of the public permissioned blockchain. So whoever is doing the transaction, they alone will be added to blocks, right? But however, who is buying what, when they are buying, all those things should be public in nature. Anyone in the public can join or read the transaction, right? But only nodes meeting the pre-approved criteria can write. So this is another area. This is comes under the public permissioned blockchain. In fact, blockchains are evolving in this area, right? And then decentralization to a central private permission. Very few party, only authorized people can read, only authorized people can write, but it is a very high scalability than private permissionless, right? This comes under the private permission. So like this, there are the 4 different types of blockchain in general based on the whether it is a public or private, or it is a permissionless or permissions is being given. So as I already discussed, the Bitcoin is an example of public, right? and that is one of the earliest thing. And Bitcoin actually become very famous because of the blockchain as a concept. As I already told you, now in the 10 years, what we are trying to do, we are separating it out. The blockchain is a concept, blockchain is a technology, and we are evolving for the multiple application. But however, the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on, lot of cryptocurrency is also there, right? That is also getting evolved. So the multi-chain is also another example of a blockchain for private permissionless. For a small kind of a blockchain within your own company, you would like to for a multi-chain blockchain. So when you go for a private permission, in fact, the IBM has developed this in the earliest days. It is called as Hyperledger Fabric, right? And that is in the area of a permissioned private, permissioned private. So the last one is actually called as Ripple. So Ripple actually, for example, the money can get transferred through Ripple from one country to another country. As professor was trying to tell, right? See, when you go from one country to another country, okay, Bitcoin is a borderless, no doubt about it. But at the same time, somewhere else it should be registered, right? So we go through some network called as Ripple network. So Ripple network is the public permissioned network. On top classification. Now the question arises, right? When do you when will you go for a private permissionless, right? And when will you go for a public permission? When will you go for a private permission? This permutation combinations, right? Very simple. First thing is, do we really need a blockchain, right? And then only we need to talk about what types of blockchain, right? So do you need to store the state of the system? You know, when you go from the Genesis block to block 1 to block 2, by storing that the root of the Merkle as well as the hash, we are actually storing the state 1, state 2, state 3, including the timestamp and everything, right? At any point of time, we can reproduce the thing also. If you don't want to store the state, I'm interested only in the transaction, then I don't use the blockchain. Better you don't go for a blockchain if you don't want to store the into the system. Simply you can utilize some any other databases like SQL, right, or Oracle, or all those databases where you want to only store the data and retrieve the data. No problem. I put some conditions also, right? So there we can go for a, of course, you know, right, in Oracle also now they are bringing in the storing the state. We'll talk about it later. So when you don't want to store the state, don't go for a blockchain. Next one is, yes, I want to store the state. Next question is, are there multiple writers? Are there multiple writers of the block? No, I'm the only person. I want to keep blockchain. Better you don't use blockchain. Because even if you want to maintain the state, right, if you are there are multiple writers are not there, then better you don't go for a, somebody is asking the question, what is a state? See, state is something, right? It's like a time travel, right? I want to go to my childhood state. Is it possible? No, it's not possible, right? You assuming it is possible, then that is what we are calling it as a state, right? We can start converting from the Genesis block, first block, second block, third block, like that we can go. So that is what simply called as a state. Yeah. So that is a fundamental thing. Yeah. I will not differentiate state from transaction. Okay, actually, okay, that is what I tried to explain in the previous slide. So transactions is nothing but, for example, I want to give money to somebody. A party A want to give the money to B, and party B want to give something to C. It is a chain of transaction. There we are not maintaining the state. State include the time. No, now who gives the first? You know, right? The problem comes in the 2008 or 2009 in the financial thing, right? The crash happened because they don't want to maintain the state, right? That is what the dual spending happens. So I put the money in the bank. I don't want to maintain the state. Okay, now bank uses loan, give it to somebody. Somebody buy the loan, and they actually invested in the real estate, and the real estate people get some money and they invested in IT industry, right? It is going like a chain of transaction. Nobody wants to maintain the state. If state is being maintained, those kind of transaction might not have occurred. Hope you are able to understand, right? That is actually called as a double spending. Particularly the credit card system is the biggest problem, right? So because of the introduction of the credit card, that is also one of the reason why this the financial meltdown had happened in the 2000s. So state is different and transaction is different. Whereas in the financial industry, we maintain the transaction, but we are not maintaining the state. State means what? One money cannot be used for something else, right? So the double spending and all those things, right? That had happened. So that is what finally everything got melted down. I think professor was trying to listed down what happened in the way before this paper on the blockchain came in the year 2009 November, right? What happened in the September and all he listed down, right? That is actually the difference between a state and a transaction. Yeah. Yes. Okay. You can simply call the transaction with the timestamp is a simple state. Yes, you are right. But there are a lot of additions. There are a lot of things are also added to it. Yeah. So are there multiple writers? Are there? No. Then don't go for a blockchain. All right. The next question is now, can you use always an online trusted third party? Right. Again, the best example quoted by professor also, the bank is a trusted third party, right? Even though the money is getting transacted from say party A to party B, we do it through the banks because we believe the banks and there is a recording, there is a trust in the bank and they also record it. That is why all the white money transaction we go through the bank. So I always give the check and that ensure that my money is white and the person who is getting the money also is being maintained as a white money. Okay. So if there is a online trusted third party is possible, you want it to be there, trusted third party, then don't use the blockchain, right? So, right, this is also one of the problem of implementation of the blockchain in the banking industry. I'm sure that application of the blockchain and the limitation of blockchain, right? They'll be talking about it. So banks actually wanted to be always a center point of attraction for any money transaction, right? So of course, the introduction of the cryptocurrency has nothing to do with the banking or regulations, but still they are not allowing, right? They will not accept some other currency in the name of the fiat currency, or they want to put some rules, right, etc. So if you have a trusted third party, then don't use the blockchain. So we already discussed about what is a trusted third party is all about. Now you see here, are all writers known? Are all writers are known? Meaning I know who is going to write it. Yes, I know the person A, I know person B, I know person C, right? Or all writers are trusted, then don't use the blockchain. It's as simple as that, right? I have 10 friends of mine. I give the money, I take the money. I'm completely having a trust on them. Then don't go for a blockchain because writers are completely. See, in the previous case, I trusted the party. Now here, I trust the. I have a few writers. I know who they are. That is known, and I also trust them because they're all my friends. So will you maintain a ledger for your friends? How much money you gave it and all? Of course, in the large transaction we used to do. That's a different thing. But normally, as far as a friend is concerned, as far as the trust is there is no need for you to maintain it. So don't go for a blockchain. So this is a fundamental. Now, when you use the blockchain, really, or all writers are not known. After all this thing, then you go for a permissionless blockchain. We already discussed the first type is a permissionless blockchain, the Bitcoin, right? There you can go for it. So you see the condition, I want to store the state, yes. Or there are multiple writers, yes. Do you want to use the third party, trusted third party? No. Or all writers are known? There, no. It's a public. So I go for a permissionless blockchain. Now, you see the next one, or all the writers are trusted? No, I'm not trusting. See, I don't want a third party, but I don't trust the writers. That is why I go for a system called public verifiability record. I will go for a verification who is doing the transaction. Yes, then I will go for a public permissioned block. Why public permissioned blockchain? Because I don't trust the writers. Who is going to write the block? So I have something called verifiability software again. Then I will go for a public permissioned blockchain. So only permissioned people, but they're still public. Okay. Now, the next type is public verifiability required. The answer is no. Then straight away go for a private permissioned blockchain. Right? In the private permission blockchain, public verifiability is not required. Writers are also not trusted. But one thing is an advantage here. I know who is the writer. Listen here. I know who is the writer. First, see the first arrow. Are all the writers are known? Yes. Right? Are all the writers are trusted? I don't trust it. But however, I also don't want to have a verifiability. Since all the writers are known, I go for a private permissioned blockchain. So this is how you use the different types of blockchain. And this, I'm sure this will give you the fundamental idea about when to use permissionless blockchain, when to use public permission blockchain, when to use private permission blockchain, and last but not the least, when not to use the blockchain. So this is what particularly the industry people, right? They want to source something, they'll say, okay, I want to have, because I know I want to create a trust, I want to go for a decentralized system, okay, I want to go for a blockchain. This is how the customers approach the people. So as a specialist, you should know when not to use the blockchain, when to use the blockchain, and when what type of blockchain to be used. Now, the types of blockchain is no, we are going to a different spectrum of types of blockchain. So the public, right, and then private. You all know, right? This is what we use it for the cloud system also, right? Public cloud, private cloud, and the hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is a combination of the public and private, right? Similar to here, we have a public blockchain, we have a private blockchain. The combination is called as hybrid blockchain. In addition to that one, when you talk about the private, right, it is a single organization, but I have a consortium of organization. Let's say that three banks join together, they can go for a blockchain, for a intra-bank or interbank like that, right? So that is called as consortium. So consortium are the group of private people join together. So this is also another type we can classify it. Public number 1, private number 2, hybrid number 3, and consortium number 4. Now what distinguishes, right? Now we know that public permissionless and permission, we discussed about it. Now we need to understand it. When will you go for a public? When will you go for a private? When will you go for a hybrid? What are all the characteristics of those that we need to understand it? So you see that in a public blockchain, any public can take part. That is why the name itself is public. Organization type is completely public. Whereas in the private blockchain, only single entity, maybe a single person also, by the by, and it can be a single organization also. You can go for a private blockchain. In the case of consortium blockchain, multiple organizations join together. So this shows, this is the difference with respect to the organization type is concerned. This difference. Okay, 1 minute. So let's move on. What are the common features on all these things? Public, private, and as well as the consortium and the hybrid, right? All chains of the blocks. That is why I designed. I actually thought of giving the foundation of the blocks. They're all chains of the blocks. They all follow P2P, right? Peer-to-peer architecture. They all use a public key cryptography or hash cryptography. They're all immutable. They're also auditable. So these are all the fundamental or common features that is being used across all these 4 types of the blockchain, right? Now let's move on, understand the further nature of this blockchain regarding to the users. So in the public blockchain, of course, it's a pseudonymous, right? That is what the word professor used, but still we call it as a anonymous user. In the public blockchain, the users are considered to be anonymous, right? So who buys what may not be known. It's because everything is shown in a kind of a hash other thing, but software can understand it, but the common people is very difficult to distinguish all those things. That is why it is called as, in the case of users, the users are anonymous as far as the public blockchain is concerned. In the case of a private blockchain, the users are known, and we are also trusting the users because it's a private, right? So when you're joining a public schools, right, and who runs it? It's a government, right? Maybe management will be there, but whereas in the private, we know everybody clearly, and so it's a known and trusted. Of course, each has its own advantages and disadvantages, but users are concerned, they are known and trusted, right? And the next one is consortium blockchain. Also, the users are known and they are trusted. What about the hybrid blockchain? Hybrid blockchain is a combinations of public and private. Their anonymity is there for a public network is concerned, whereas the private people, it is completely trusted, known and trusted. So it's a combination of both anonymous and trusted as far as the hybrid, the fourth type is concerned, right? So let's move on to the next one, access. So access is open and transparent as far as the public blockchain is concerned, right? So accessibility is very transparent, and as far as the private blockchain is concerned, accessibility is fully restricted. If you are permission, then only you are allowed to add, right? Even in, looking into the blockchain. And the consortium blockchain is, it is selectively open. For few, it is open. For few, the access is restricted. So what about the hybrid blockchain? Hybrid blockchain is centralized control for providing the access. Hence, privacy and confidentiality both are maintained in a hybrid. Again, you know hybrid, right? Hybrid is a combination of public and private. So it has both the properties. Now, we'll move on. Network type. Network type is decentralized, completely decentralized in the public blockchain. As far as the private blockchain is concerned, it is called as centralized. So centralized leads to single point of failure. Again, the meltdown, right? The bank fails, everything fails, right? Whereas in the public blockchain, it is a decentralized, so there is a 0 point failure. That is what the main thing about the public blockchain. So when you go to the consortium blockchain, it is partially decentralized, and so we have the multiple point of failure in the consortium, right? Consortium again is a combination, right, of multiple private. So partially decentralized, multiple point of failure. So when you go with the hybrid, the combination of the public and the private, it is a 0 point failure. So it's a 0 point failure as far as the public is concerned, and it is a single point of failure. Private blockchain is concerned, and the consortium is partially decentralized, and so multiple point of failure. So this is also helpful for you to select, right, which is very important for you. Is accessibility important for you, or the network type is important for you, right? So the next thing is operation. So operation is concerned, right? Anyone can read or initiate or receive the transaction. That is what is called as a public. So as far as the private is concerned, operation is pre-approved. Pre-approved participants can read and receive the transaction. So the consortium means it's also pre-approved participants can read and initiate any transaction. So you want to have that operation like this, accordingly you need to select the type. So when you talk about the hybrid, right? So the combination of the public and private, any combination is possible. This is the biggest advantages when it comes to the operation is concerned. So right, operations are always customizable in a hybrid environment because it's a combination of both public and private. So central authority, you want to do it, you can have it, or you want to decentralize it, you can also decentralize it. So the next property is verification. Who verify the transaction, right? As far as the public blockchain is concerned, anyone can be a node and anyone take part as a miner. Anybody can verify the transaction. But in the private blockchain is single people, single node, single validations, right? Or there is a central authority to create the blocks or the managing the blockchain. So in the consortium, only privileged members can validate and create a block. So in the hybrid, public network is verified by the block. So that is as far as the verification is concerned. So next property is immutability. Yes, see, everything is immutable. We discussed that, right? But as far as the public blockchain is concerned, it is completely secured by hashing algorithm. But do you need to go for a hashing in private? The answer is no. But we have a consensus mechanism. We will be discussing in the next session, right? So we have something called secured by distributed consensus mechanism in the private blockchain. In the consortium, again, we go for a secured by distributed consensus mechanism, right? And hybrid, it is up to you. You can go with the hashing. I can also go with the distributed consensus mechanism. Depends on the need of the people, need of the parties involved in the hybrid. Now, what is the consensus mechanism? This also lays a foundation for our next session, right? Proof of work, proof of stake. There are the two different types of the consensus mechanism. That is what will be used in the public blockchain. Whereas in the private blockchain, there are different variations of the proof of work and proof of stake will be used. And when the consortium also, we will use the variations of the proof of work and proof of. What are all the variations? What are the different types? We will be discussing in the next session, in fact, right? In the case of the hybrid blockchain, we use a distributed proof of stake, right, in public, and there are variations. We use it in the private. So like this, we use a different consensus mechanism is concerned. Now, Professor also talking about incentivization, right? So, in fact, the technology in the last 10 years, right now, currently we reached a stage that we need to work on a lot of incentivization. So, what is incentivization, right? We discussed about the mining. The mining, I'm able to add some hash. Then every miner who solves the puzzle will be given some currency, maybe Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, like that. That is called as incentivization, right? In the case of a public, incentivize miners to grow the network. We also incentivize the miners, right, towards the mines. But here in the private, no, we have all the known users, right? So users are limited within a company. So there is no need for you go for a incentivization as far as the private network is concerned, because the participants are known, right? But whereas the consortium, we go for kind of a limited incentivization. Whereas the hybrid, you can incentivize users in the main public network. In the private, there is no need for the incentivization, right? It is because it's your own network. You want to add, you can add it. This, we have a different other characteristics as far as the blockchain is concerned, with respect to the trust, with respect to the transaction speed, right? Energy consumption. In fact, this is the biggest challenge as far as the blockchain is concerned. When you go for a public blockchain, the energy consumption is very high. As Professor was telling, right, you can Google, even people say that you can, in the energy consumption in those days, and adding one block, right, you could have done an electricity for the whole city. That much of energy consumption is being utilized just for adding a single block, right? That is a very high as far as the public blockchain is concerned. Whereas in the private, particularly when you go to the, even for the consortium and hybrid, right, it's a very low, because parties are trusted. There is no puzzle, there is no solving, there is no nuns, right? It's being trusted as long as you know that who is actually giving. If you trust them, just verify the business. That's it. You can go for a adding the blockchain. Then again, the another problem is the scalability, right? As we already discussed, scalability is very, very limited as far as the public blockchain is concerned, right? Because of the lot of algorithms and a lot of checking, lot of consensus mechanism. You need to go and everybody should say that this is the correct block. The majority should say, for example, if you say that there are 7,000 nodes are there, let's say some numbers, okay? 7,000 nodes are there. All the 7,000 needs to give I'm the valid block or not. This particular block is valid or not. Sometimes they maliciously they also try to create the block. So this is actually the problem with the public blockchain. But I don't have that kind of a scalability problem when I go for a hybrid blockchain, the combinations, right? Even I have a better scalability when you go for the private and consortium itself, I get the benefit, right? So as far as the trust is concerned, complete trust-free system. Public is a complete trust-free system. But here also the trust-free system as far as hybrid is concerned, but we have a consensus, right? That takes care of the thing. It is a trusted, and we also need to trust the majority as far as the consortium blockchains are concerned. So security, right? Security is needs to be very high, right? As far as the hybrid blockchain is concerned, because you may be having a lot of combinations, right? Even in the private blockchain, you need to have a good kind of security, right? But in the private blockchain, the security is completely dependent on the engineering nature of the blockchain, right? Whereas in the consortium, the combinations, right? You can have some kind of a consensus-based security also. So security is dependent on the blockchain architecture adapter, meaning what kind of architecture you would like to go for a consortium blockchain is concerned. So these are all the different types of blockchain, and these are all the things are concerned. Different properties of the blockchains are concerned, right? And before ending the session on the types of blockchain, going to the questions, right? So Bitcoin and Ethereum are the very famous blockchain is concerned. I mean, the cryptocurrency is concerned, all right? The founder of the Bitcoin is Satoshi Nakamoto, and Vitalik is the Ethereum owner. In fact, he's the founder, right? See, the Bitcoin was created, we are mostly going for a cryptocurrency, going for a currency, right, against the fiat currency. That is what the fundamental thing we went for a Bitcoin. But what happened, this Vitalik concern actually used that blockchain technology, began Bitcoin, and he tried to extend that blockchain. The technology is concerned. That is why it is called as Ethereum is a network software. right? So then Ethereum is getting a very famous also, but you see that it is just 5 years old. July 2015, the first network Ethereum thing was considered, right? Of course, it is also a coin. It is sellable in market that is called as ETH. That's the name, right? And the coin symbol of Bitcoin is BTC. Now, one thing which I would like to tell here, we have something called UTXO, unspent transaction, right? It's nothing but a chain of transaction is what is maintained in the Bitcoin. But now, whatever we use, in the normal day-to-day life, the account life thing, right? Or you have the coin token systems, right? Those kind of things are available in the Ethereum is concerned. So everybody can create an account. I can put some money, some ETH in my account, and I can give it to whoever wants, right? Whereas unspent transaction, right? I need to go and trace it from the beginning. So how many Bitcoin initially I had it, who gave it, and then whom I give the second, then third, then fourth, then only I can do the fifth transaction. So when I go for the sixth transaction, again I need to start from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, confirm it, then go for a sixth transaction. I cannot just take it from my wallet and give it, as far as the Bitcoin is concerned, right? And but Ethereum is concerned, straight away I have an account, I have my own wallet, so that is a thing. And very important, monetary policy is hard coded, right? As far as the Bitcoin is concerned, but in the Ethereum, no, the monetary policy is not hard coded. So that makes it very advantageous for software professionals like us, right? Within the block, now they get to the next level and writing a software code within a block, right? So far we talked about only the transaction, right? So in the block, you can do whatever you want, right? That is what the biggest advantages of the blockchain is concerned. So Ethereum says that, okay, I will add the transaction. I will also add some blocks, codes also I will add it. That is actually called as smart contracts. So smart contracts ensure that, right? You was talking about different meltdown, different systems of the trustiness and other thing, right? Particularly Sybil attack, right? He was discussing about it. That can be easily avoided using this software coding is concerned. So yes, if conditions are met, the block will get added and the transaction will get executed. So the conditions are nothing but it is nothing but a smart contracts. Now, one more thing before we end up this session, right? So I saw one question also earlier. So how can you learn that blockchain concept? Say, I want to create my own blockchain, my own cryptocurrency. Somebody asked, right? So please understand there is something, a lot of ICO platforms are available. Like what we have now, you run your own company going for a public, you have an IPO, right? So like this, there are a lot of ICO free platforms are available. Of course, there are a set of preconditions. You need to write something called a white paper. So white paper is nothing but tell me about your company and who is going to run your company, what is an objective, why are you creating it, how do you see that the value will go up or down, and what kind of mechanism you want to implement, what is the rule you have, right? So that is called as white paper, right? So that's an interesting, and there is a structure of the white paper also. As long as you write in white paper and you give it, so anybody can create any currency in the world. I'm talking about cryptocurrency. As long as the platform is free, by the by, okay? There are some paid platforms also available. That is called as ICO. So, and then what else? Backward compatibility is available in Bitcoin. What is backward compatibility? Because please understand, so for example, right, everybody decided that from BTC, they want to go for some other version of the Bitcoin. Of course, there are other 3 or 4 versions are available. That kind of compatibility available. Say, for example, I have hundreds of block today. Now, 101 block, right? There can be 2 101 block if everybody agree for it. So I will go in another direction. That 101 will be a new block. I'll go in enhancing that 101 block in another direction. The old 101 block, right? That will also be added. Old 102, old 103, like that. That will also kept added. So that kind of a branching is always available as far as Bitcoin is concerned, right? But Ethereum is concerned, Vitalik is very clear on that. No, there is no branching. There's going to be only one ETH. So we'll all work on that. So that is, he is not allowed for it to happen. That is, backward compatibility is not available. You see that because of that, what is the advantages, right? For Bitcoin, when you're adding the block, it should be only 1 MB per block. I cannot add thousands of lakhs of transaction in a block. The moment the size of the block goes beyond 1 MB, you are not allowed to add the block into the blockchain. So you see that in addition to the transaction, you also have a lot of other things, right? Miracle root is there. You need to give some space, and you need to have a previous cache is also there. Timestamp is also there. Whatever the left out portion only will be used as the transaction. So once you reach that 1 MB, you cannot add it. You can remove and add it before you add it to the block. That means you can remove and add any number of transaction, no problem. But you beyond 1 MB, the block cannot be added in a Bitcoin is concerned. But in the Ethereum, there is no limit. That is why nowadays people go on adding even the lot of software codes also they're adding within the block, because there is no limit for the block. But it is also speed because of various other reasons, right? So, okay, there is something called Remix browser, like what we have in Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, right? There is a browser called as a Remix browser. You can Google, you can download it, and there you can write a program called as Solidity. So Solidity is a program for Ethereum, right? So it's a very simple language like a C and C++, Java. The basics you know, right? Some addition, subtraction, multiplication, and anybody can write a code on Solidity. So you can use the browser can be downloaded, Remix browser, learn Solidity. Then you are also allowed to add Ethereum to any other blockchain. You can also create your own block, right? All the procedures are there in the Remix, you know, right? And Remix, once you create a Solidity, then it can be added with other blocks also, meaning the other software blocks also. For example, there is something called Ganecha, Ganecha is there, or my own, my wallet is there, my Ethereum wallet, MEW, right? So you can add Solidity code with that also. Thereby you can collaboratively work with that. For example, I want to get one Ethereum from my Ganecha, and then I can transfer that to my Ethereum wallet through Solidity. So you can play around, right? And you can also go around in the real time also. It's not that no, just you want to play around as a game. That is also allowed. They will give you some dummy codes. You can, once you see that everything is good, okay, now it's a time I want to play to the market. Like simple, right? You want to go from private company to the public company.